The violin started playing, and everyone stood up. My sister walked down the aisle like a princess in a $9,000 designer wedding gown. My dad sat in the front row, tears in his eyes, proud, emotional, glowing. Me? I was 3 rows back, in a wrinkled dress I borrowed from my roommate. My makeup was already smudged, and not a single person had even looked my way. I didn't want to be there. Every second was torture. But I had no choice. If you don't attend your sister's wedding, I'm cutting off your tuition. That's what my father said 2 weeks ago. Word for word. So there I was, obedient, silent, and humiliated. I smiled in the photos. I clapped during the speeches. I even fixed my sister's veil when she snapped her fingers at me like I was one of the wedding planners. But what nobody knew, what not even my father suspected, is that I wasn't there to be part of their fantasy. I was there because it was the final chapter of the role they forced me to play. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 21 years old. I'm a biomedical science student at a mid-tier university in Minnesota. I've been on the dean's list for 3 semesters in a row. I work part-time in the campus lab. I study until 2 a.m. most nights. And I've done everything my family ever asked of me. But this story isn't about me being the good daughter. It's about what happens when the daughter they forgot learns how to fight back. Because sitting in that church, surrounded by fake smiles and designer lies, I realized something. You can take my tuition. You can take my seat at the front. But you can't take my voice. And I was finally ready to use it. I used to believe my family was just a little traditional. You know, old school values, firm expectations, clear roles. My dad always said, family comes first, and loyalty means everything. For the longest time, I believed that. I followed every rule, stayed in line, and kept my head down. My older sister Rachel, though, she was the golden one. She always had the spotlight, the best dresses, the loudest praise, and the most expensive birthday gifts. And I genuinely didn't mind, at first. When I was younger, Rachel was charming. Everyone loved her, and I used to look up to her. I thought her confidence was something I lacked, like maybe I was just too quiet, too bookish, too plain. She got a brand new car the day she turned 16. I got my mom's old Corolla, the one with duct tape on the mirror. When Rachel wanted to go to Paris after high school, my parents sent her, no questions asked. When I asked to apply for a summer science camp, I got told, "We can't afford that right now." Still, I tried not to let it get to me. I worked hard in school. I applied for scholarships. I stayed out of trouble. I wanted to make them proud, to be the kind of daughter they'd see as valuable. My dad always said he was proud of me for being responsible, but it always felt like a backhanded compliment, like I was just the budget-friendly daughter, while Rachel was the real investment. The older we got, the more the differences sharpened. At family dinners, Rachel would go on and on about her fashion blog and her engagement brand deals. Everyone hung on her every word like she was some kind of celebrity. If I tried to talk about my research, my dad would glance at his watch or change the subject. Once, I mentioned I was working on a protein synthesis project, and he literally said, "That sounds boring as hell, Emily." Rachel laughed. And I laughed too, even though it stung. But it wasn't just about attention, it was about power. Rachel always got to set the tone. If she was in a bad mood, the whole house suffered. If I was in a bad mood, I was told I was too emotional or being difficult. One time, she called me crying because her boyfriend hadn't proposed yet. I spent 2 hours consoling her. But when I had a panic attack before finals week, she told me to get it together and said I was being dramatic. And through all of it, the subtle cuts, the glaring favoritism, the one-sided loyalty, I stayed quiet. because I thought maybe, just maybe, I wasn't trying hard enough. That if I kept going, eventually they'd see me the way they saw her. I even started convincing myself that the financial support my dad gave me for school was his version of love, that maybe, in his own way, he cared. That illusion shattered the day he threatened to cut it off. I had skipped Rachel's second bridal shower. I had a lab midterm the next morning, and I'd already attended 3 other wedding events for her in the last 6 weeks. I thought it wouldn't be a big deal. But apparently it was. My dad called me that night, furious, accusing me of being selfish, of embarrassing the family. And then he dropped the line that changed everything. "If you don't show up to her wedding and smile like you mean it, I'm pulling your tuition. You think I owe you that forever? You're not entitled to my money, Emily." That was the moment. The moment I realized I was never a daughter to him, just a debt. A quiet investment with conditional returns. I sat on my dorm bed for a long time after that call. Not crying. Just still. Frozen in the realization that no matter how much I achieved, no matter how quietly I suffered, I would never be enough in that family. Not compared to Rachel. Not compared to their perfect image of what a daughter should be. But I also realized something else. I didn't have to stay in that role. I didn't have to keep proving myself to people who only saw me when they needed a prop. And if they wanted to see me play the obedient little sister one last time, fine. I'd give them a show. But it would be the final performance they'd never forget. After that phone call, something in me went numb. I showed up to the rehearsal dinner like I was supposed to. I wore the off-the-shoulder dress Rachel picked out, the one she said would make me look less like a student and more like family. I smiled through the fake compliments, the backhanded jokes, the awkward photos. But inside, I was somewhere else entirely. Watching, noticing, collecting. Every small moment became a clue. My dad only talked to me when it was about the wedding timeline or making sure I had RSVP'd. My mom handed me a gift bag and said, "Don't forget to post this on your Instagram story. Rachel wants her bridesmaids to boost her hashtag." I wasn't a bridesmaid. I never had been. But she'd made custom bags anyway, mostly for the aesthetic. Then came the final fitting. Rachel stood in front of a mirror, spinning in her dress like she was on the cover of some bridal magazine. I complimented her. I always did, and she just looked at me and said, "You know, I was nervous you'd do something weird at the wedding, like cry or cause a scene. But now I think you finally get your role." That word, role, stuck to my ribs like cold metal. That night, back in my dorm, I opened Instagram and saw a video Rachel had posted from the fitting. I was in the background, holding her train, looking like a paid assistant. The caption said, "When your maid of honor finally learns to stay in her lane, nail polish ring hashtag golden girl." I wasn't her maid of honor. She had 3 actual bridesmaids. But that's what she called me anyway, not out of respect, but control. And the comments were worse. "Aw, your sister's so chill about being in your shadow. You always shine the brightest, Ratch. Honestly can't even tell that's your sister. Is she adopted?" I didn't even realize I was crying until I saw my phone screen blur. But it wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was focus. Cold, sharp focus. The next week, I started noticing how far the rot had gone. At the family brunch 2 days before the wedding, my aunt loudly praised Rachel's fiancé for finally bringing class into the family. Everyone laughed. My dad looked at me and said, "Emily, maybe you'll understand when you meet someone who's not in a lab coat." My cousin tried to change the subject, but the message had already landed. Later that night, while grabbing a jacket from the guest room closet, I accidentally overheard something. My dad was on the phone with someone, maybe one of his brothers. His voice was casual, like he didn't even care if anyone was nearby. I told her to show up or lose the tuition. It worked. Honestly, that girl's too scared to stand on her own anyway. Rachel's got the spine. Emily just takes up space. The words didn't cut me. They carved me. Because that was the moment I realized they didn't even pretend to love me anymore. There was no mask. No sugarcoating. Just truth. Raw and careless. The worst part? It wasn't new. I'd just been too desperate to see it all along. I didn't storm in. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I simply walked back to my room, sat at the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall for almost an hour. And then I opened my laptop. First, I started looking up emergency scholarships, ones for students dealing with financial instability or family estrangement. Then I opened the voice recorder app on my phone and replayed my dad's line over and over again. She's too scared to stand on her own. I pressed record. And for the first time in years, I finally started writing my own script. The night before the wedding, Rachel had a final girls-only gathering at our family house. It wasn't a sleepover, more like a casual wine and facial kind of night. I didn't want to go. My stomach was twisted, my face sore from fake smiles, and my heart already halfway out the door. But I showed up. Because I wanted to see it. All of it. The last piece of proof that would seal what I already knew. The house looked like a Pinterest board vomited glitter. Balloons, LED signs, little nameplates. Of course, Rachel had her own signature font. She barely acknowledged me when I walked in. Just handed me a flute of champagne and told me to be less depressing tonight. Around 11 p.m., most of the girls were tipsy and giggling in the living room. I was upstairs in the guest room, texting my lab supervisor about missing Monday's shift. I heard two voices coming from Rachel's room, her and one of her bridesmaids, Liz. I didn't mean to listen. I really didn't. But then I heard my name. Honestly, I'm shocked she actually showed up. I thought for sure she'd pull one of her dramatic nerd meltdowns, Rachel said, laughing. Liz replied, "You were smart to threaten her tuition. That girl literally has nothing going for her except your dad's money." "I mean, yeah," Rachel giggled. "And I've been telling him to cut her off for years. Like, why are we still funding her weird lab life? She's never going to get married. She's just gonna age alone with bacteria and podcasts." They both burst into laughter. Then Rachel added, "Honestly, I kind of hope she does make a scene tomorrow. Gives me more views." That was it. Not the worst thing they'd ever said. But it was complete. The final dose of cruelty I needed. Rachel didn't just think I was invisible, she enjoyed it. My own sister saw my pain as content. I pulled out my phone. I'd already been recording casually since I got to the house. I knew better than to trust any of them. But now I made sure it caught that part, clearly. Their voices, their laughter, the tone that reeked of superiority and entitlement. And then I did something I didn't expect. I smiled. Not out of pain. Not out of defeat. But because for the first time, I wasn't the victim. I was the only person in that house who knew what was coming. I left early that night. Told Rachel I had cramps. She didn't even look up from her phone. Back in my dorm, I opened the audio file, replayed the section where she mocked my loneliness, and saved it under a new name. File folder goldengirl_eulogy.mp3. I also emailed a copy to myself, my cousin, and uploaded one to a private cloud folder labeled, "Just in case they try to lie," because I didn't know exactly how I'd use it yet. But I knew I would. The morning of the wedding, I woke up before sunrise. No tears. No anxiety. Just clarity. My plan wasn't perfect yet, but the foundation was there. This wasn't going to be some childish tantrum or wedding day sabotage. No. This would be a message. Not for Rachel. Not for my dad. For me. First, I made a backup of everything. The voice recording from Rachel's room. The Instagram comments. Screenshots of texts. Even the bank transfer logs that showed how my dad had restricted my monthly allowance unless I attended events with full enthusiasm, as he put it in one email. Then I drafted an email to the university's financial aid office. I explained, calmly and professionally, that I was facing familial financial control and emotional coercion related to my education. I attached proof, including the voicemail my dad left me about pulling my tuition if I skipped the wedding. At the bottom of the email I wrote, "I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for options." I also submitted 3 emergency scholarship applications I had pre-filled the night before. Each one asked about hardship. I didn't exaggerate anything. I just told the truth, something my family had avoided doing for years. After that, I reached out to my maternal grandmother, my mom's mom. We hadn't spoken in over a year, ever since a disagreement turned into full family drama. But she answered. And when I told her everything, she said 5 words I hadn't heard in a long time. "I believe you, sweetheart. Come over." She didn't ask for proof. She didn't make me justify my emotions. She just listened. I told her I'd come by after the wedding. There was something I needed to finish first. Back at my dorm, I packed a small bag. Not a dramatic runaway kit. Just what I'd need if things got worse: documents, clothes, laptop, chargers. My freedom pack, I called it. Not because I planned on disappearing, but because I was done depending on people who used love as leverage. The final piece of my strategy was something Rachel and my dad would never expect from me: public composure. I showed up to the wedding ceremony like a pro. Hairstyled, makeup flawless, posture perfect. My dress was still borrowed, but I wore it like it belonged to me. When the family posed for photos, I smiled. When guests asked how I was, I said, "Thrilled for her." Every fake thing they expected from me, I delivered. And I waited. Because I knew my moment wasn't in the vows. It was in the toast. At the reception, my dad stood beside Rachel and her new husband, glass raised, giving a long-winded speech about legacy and strong daughters. When he looked at me mid-sentence, I didn't flinch. I just raised my glass and smiled. Then Rachel took the mic and did her whole "Thank you for loving me unconditionally" performance. There was applause. There were tears. And then, because Rachel loved to make everything about her, she turned to me. "Emily, would you like to say a few words? You've been such a quiet little rock through everything." People clapped, expecting something sweet, humble, supportive. I walked slowly to the mic, took a deep breath, and I said, "I do have a few words." I saw Rachel's expression tighten, like she suddenly remembered who I really was. "Thank you all for being here today. I know weddings are about love, family, celebration, and truth. So I thought, in honor of all 3, I'd share something Rachel and I recorded together last night." I pulled out my phone. Hit play. The Bluetooth speaker caught it instantly. Rachel's voice filled the air. "She's just gonna age alone with bacteria and podcasts." A wave of silence washed over the room. Then came her laugh. "Honestly, I kind of hope she does make a scene tomorrow. Gives me more views." Gasps. Murmurs. One guest covered her mouth. Someone in the back said, "What the hell?" I let it play just long enough, then stopped it, and I smiled, a real smile this time. "Congratulations, Rachel. You finally got your moment." And with that, I handed the mic to the DJ and walked off stage. No yelling. No tears. Just cold, clean clarity. Outside the hall, I felt the wind hit my face. It was the first time in years I felt light. Not because they were destroyed, but because they no longer controlled the narrative. This was your power flip. Controlled, strategic, satisfying, no screaming, just exposure. The chaos inside the reception hall didn't hit me until I was already outside. As the heavy doors closed behind me, I heard someone shout, "Turn that off!" Then glass clinking. Some guests left. Some stayed frozen, unsure of what to do next. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. The damage was done. Not by manipulation. Not by force. But by their own words. All I'd done was press play. 5 minutes later, I was in the parking lot when my cousin Jenna caught up with me. She didn't say anything, just hugged me. Tight. When she pulled away, her eyes were red. "I always knew something was off. I just didn't know it was that bad." I nodded. "It was worse. But this was enough." She offered to drive me home, but I already had an Uber waiting. Destination, my grandmother's house, where, for once, I'd be welcome without conditions. While riding away from the wedding I never wanted to attend, my phone buzzed again and again. Voicemails from my dad. One from my mom, crying and asking how I could ruin Rachel's big day. Texts from random relatives, split between support and shame. I didn't reply to any of them, because I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Not anymore. 2 days later, my financial aid counselor emailed me back. She'd flagged my case to the emergency board. Not only was I eligible for a hardship scholarship, they were also opening an inquiry into coercive tuition dependency and parental control, something the university had just started tracking due to mental health concerns. By the end of the week, I had my tuition completely covered. Independently. No more strings. No more begging. No more silence. Then something unexpected happened. The video from the wedding, a guest had recorded the whole moment, from my speech to the audio, made its way to social media. And within 48 hours, it blew up. Not in a sensational, viral way, but in a quiet, powerful one. People began commenting things like, "This is why emotional abuse isn't always loud. She exposed them with class. No yelling. Just truth. I wish I had her strength." This was healing to watch. Rachel tried to do damage control, posted an Instagram reel about being betrayed on her big day. But people weren't buying it. Someone reposted her old captions mocking me. Others posted side-by-side screenshots of her public image versus her private cruelty. Her follower count dropped. Brand deals she was counting on quietly backed out. Even her new husband, Tyler, apparently had a long conversation with her after hearing everything. And a week later, I found out through Jenna that he'd moved back to his parents' house. To think. Poetic. As for my dad, he didn't speak to me for nearly 2 months. No calls. No texts. Just absence. Until one day, out of nowhere, he emailed me a short message. "We need to talk. I miss my daughter." I never replied. Because the daughter he missed? She was never real. She was a placeholder. A pawn. A backup plan. And she doesn't exist anymore. Instead, I focused on rebuilding, but this time on my own terms. I moved out of the dorms and into a small off-campus apartment funded by my own scholarship and part-time research stipend. I kept studying, kept working, kept growing. I built friendships that weren't tied to guilt or obligation. I started therapy. I even adopted a cat, named her Echo, because that's all Rachel's words became in the end. Just noise that couldn't touch me anymore. Powerful, public fall, but handled with dignity. Viewers now feel full justice and deep satisfaction. It's been 11 months since the wedding. And my life, it's quiet now. Not in a lonely way, in a free way. I wake up in my small off-campus apartment to sunlight instead of tension. I feed Echo, my cat, who now curls up next to my research papers like a little gray stress therapist. I go to class. I work in the lab. I read things that excite me. I study things that matter. No one texts me to guilt me into showing up. No one withholds love like it's a paycheck I have to earn. The silence I used to fear, it's become my peace. Rachel and I haven't spoken since the wedding. I heard she tried to relaunch her image a few months later with some new blog rebrand, but it didn't stick. People remember what they heard, what they felt. And what they felt was that she was never who she pretended to be. My dad? One more email came through a few weeks ago. Just one sentence. "I'm sorry if you felt hurt." That told me everything I needed to know. That he still didn't get it. That his apology was performative. That his love was still conditional. So, I archived the message and moved on. And you know what? That was the moment I realized I was truly done. Done waiting to be seen. Done hoping to be chosen. Done earning space in rooms I was born into. I no longer measure my worth in comparison to Rachel. Or anyone. I don't need to be the good daughter, or the forgiving sister, or even the quiet achiever. I just need to be me. Independent, educated, alive, and whole. There's this one quote I keep taped to my desk now. I don't even know where I found it. It says, "Some people only love you when you're easy to control. The rest don't deserve a seat in your story." That's how I live now. My story is mine. And I'm finally the one holding the pen. So if you're out there, watching this, listening, feeling that ache I once felt, just know this. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep their image warm. You can walk away. You can start again. And sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply becoming the version of yourself they never thought you could be. She took the spotlight. He took my tuition. But they never took me. And from that, I built a life worth living, not to prove them wrong, but to finally live right.